The CEO called me 3 times in 10 minutes, and I let every single call ring until the screen went dark. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering, then set it face down on the table like it was something dangerous. 2 days ago, that same man had signed off on my termination without bothering to look me in the eye. Now his name kept lighting up my screen, over and over, like nothing had happened. "Kelsey, please call me back." That was the first voicemail. Calm, controlled. The second was shorter. "We need to talk. There's been some confusion." By the third, his voice had changed. "This is getting serious. I need you to answer." I exhaled slowly and didn't move. "My name is Kelsey. I worked for that company for 6 years. I didn't steal. I didn't lie. I didn't sabotage anything. I reported my boss's misconduct directly to the CEO, exactly the way the employee handbook told me to. I used dates, quotes, witnesses. I kept my voice steady when I said, "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a pattern." 2 days later, Human Resources sat me down and said, "This decision isn't about the incident. It's about team unity." I asked, "So what happens to him?" They didn't answer that question. The CEO didn't speak during the meeting. He just nodded once when the paperwork slid across the table. When I stood up, he said, "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." I said, "I didn't." No one stopped me when I walked out. I left before anyone could call it a joke, before they could say it was taken out of context, before they could ask me to come back quietly and pretend nothing happened. I refused to make it easy for them, and now, suddenly, they needed me. Something inside that building was breaking. I could hear it in the pauses between his words, in the way his confidence slipped with each voicemail. Whatever they thought I was protecting by staying silent, it wasn't holding together anymore. I picked up my phone, turned it off, and let the past catch up to them on its own. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. It is inspired by real workplace dynamics, power imbalances, and the quiet moments when ordinary people are pushed into extraordinary decisions. Each story carries its own message, its own consequences, and its own truth meant not to accuse, but to reflect how easily systems fail when integrity becomes inconvenient. 2 days earlier, I had walked into the CEO's office believing honesty still meant something. Have you ever seen something wrong at work and felt the room silently warn you not to react that morning? I was reviewing reports when my supervisor, Mark, stopped behind my desk. He didn't lower his voice. He never did. "Did you seriously send that email without running it by me?" he said. "I followed the process." I replied, "It was time sensitive." Mark laughed, short and sharp. "Process is what I say it is." A few desks over, Lauren stiffened but kept typing. No one looked up. Mark leaned closer. "You need to learn when to stay in your lane." "Kelsey." I said nothing at first. That was the old reflex. Stay calm, let it pass. But this wasn't new. Last week, he'd snapped at a junior analyst until she apologized for something that wasn't her fault. The week before that, he'd joked about a client being too emotional to negotiate, then assigned her account to himself. I stood. "You don't talk to people like that." The room went quiet. Mark smiled, slow and deliberate. "Excuse me. You don't get to humiliate people because you're in charge," I said. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. "It's unprofessional." He tilted his head. "Careful, you're crossing a line." I crossed it when I pretended this was normal. I said. Mark stepped back. "If you have a problem, take it upstairs. I plan to." His smile vanished. That would be a mistake. I sat down, my hands cold. For a moment, doubt pressed in. I remembered another job, another manager, another time I told myself it wasn't my fight. I remembered how that silence followed me for years. Lauren whispered, "You shouldn't." "I know," I said, "but I can't do this again." Mark walked away without another word. By lunch, the tension was everywhere. By the end of the day, I had drafted notes, pulled emails, and replayed his words until they were exact. I didn't know what would happen next. I only knew I was done pretending this was just how things worked. What happens when the person with the most power listens, but only halfway? The CEO, Daniel Ross, gestured for me to sit before I'd even finished closing the door. "I've reviewed your email," he said. "You were very thorough. I wanted to be clear," I replied. "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's ongoing behavior." Daniel folded his hands. "I'm not disputing that something happened." That word landed hard. Something. I'm saying it's part of a pattern. I said, multiple incidents, multiple people. He nodded once. Mark is direct. That's not new. Direct isn't the same as abusive, I said. He humiliates people. Publicly. Daniel leaned back. You have to understand the context. We're in a high-pressure environment, so that excuses it. No, he said quickly. But it complicates it. I felt the shift then. The way his attention moved away from what Mark had done and toward what this conversation represented. I said, there are witnesses, emails. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for accountability. Daniel exhaled. Accountability has consequences. For him? I said, for the company. He corrected. For morale, for client confidence, for internal stability. I stared at him. You're worried about optics. I'm worried about risk, he said. And right now, this is a risk. My throat tightened. Reporting misconduct is a risk. Escalating it this way can be, he said. These things are usually handled quietly for who he didn't answer that. Instead, he said, I appreciate you coming to me directly. That shows loyalty. I didn't come here to be loyal. I said, I came here to be honest. Daniel's expression softened. The way people's do when they think they're being reasonable. Let me look into this. In the meantime, I'd advise you to take a step back. A step back from pushing, he said. Give us room to manage this internally. I stood. I already did what the policy told me to do. He looked up at me, calm, measured. Policies are guidelines. Kelsey, judgment is leadership. As I walked out, it felt like I had just been warned without being threatened. And somehow, that was worse. How does reporting misconduct turn into a termination meeting? The Human Resources Director, Patricia Wells, didn't invite me to sit. She just waited until the door clicked shut and said, this won't take long. Daniel Ross was already there. He stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the street below like this meeting wasn't meant for him. Patricia opened a folder. After reviewing recent events, we've decided to end your employment effective immediately. I looked at Daniel. He didn't look back. On what grounds, I asked. Patricia didn't hesitate. Behavior inconsistent with company culture. I reported misconduct. I said, is that the behavior? This isn't about the incident, she replied smoothly. It's about impact. Impact on who she met my eyes, on the team. Daniel finally spoke. Kelsey, this isn't personal. I laughed once, sharp and quiet. You're firing me. For disrupting team unity, Patricia said, reading directly from the page. I said, where is Mark in this conversation? Patricia closed the folder slightly. We're not here to discuss other employees. Daniel stepped in. This is about maintaining stability. So the problem isn't what he did, I said. It's that I said something? Patricia's voice stayed even. Your approach created tension. My approach was following policy. Policies require judgment, Daniel said. And leadership means choosing the least damaging path. I nodded slowly. You chose him. No one denied it. Patricia slid the papers across the table. You'll receive severance and continuation of benefits for a limited period. I don't want your silence money, I said. It's standard, she replied. So is confidentiality. I pushed the folder back. I'm not signing anything today. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I stood. You made it simple the moment you decided the truth was inconvenient. As I walked toward the door, Patricia said, security will escort you out. I turned once. I did exactly what you tell employees to do. You just didn't expect me to mean it. Daniel still didn't look at me. What do you lose when you refuse to play along my phone? Stayed quiet for 2 days after they walked me out. No messages from coworkers. No, I'm sorry this happened. Just silence. On the 3rd day, Lauren finally called. I wanted to reach out, she said carefully, like the words had been rehearsed. But people are scared. Of Mark, I asked. Of being next, she said. HR told everyone not to discuss your departure, so they're controlling the story. I said. There was a pause. They're calling it a mutual separation. I laughed, then stopped myself. Tell them I didn't agree to anything. I know, Lauren said. I wanted you to hear it from me. Later that afternoon, my sister called. You sound calm, she said. I'm trying to be. You could have kept your head down, she said gently. You had good benefits. A steady salary. I know. She hesitated. Are you sure this was worth it? That question followed me everywhere. It sat with me while I canceled subscriptions, while I checked my account balance, while I opened an email from the company confirming my final paycheck. I read the line about severance twice. It came with conditions I hadn't accepted. The next morning, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. He looked surprised, then smug. "Didn't expect to see you," he said. "Guess things didn't work out." "They worked out exactly the way you planned," I replied. He shrugged. "You should have known how this would go." "I did," I said. "I just hoped I was wrong." He leaned closer. "People like you always think the rules protect them. People like you always need someone to believe that," I said. He walked away without another word. That night, alone at my kitchen table, I finally let the doubt surface. I replayed every conversation, every choice. I wondered if staying quiet would have been easier. But even in that moment, I knew one thing clearly. Silence would have cost me more than I could afford to lose. "What if the apology isn't really an apology at all?" Daniel Ross called, just after 9. I let it ring once, then answered. "Kelsey," he said, too warmly. "I'm glad you picked up. You weren't before." I said, a breath. Things moved quickly. Emotions were high. "They weren't high," I said. "They were calculated." "We can resolve this," he said. Quietly, I waited. "We'd like to bring you back," Daniel continued. "Same role, same pay, clean slate, a clean slate for who I asked, for everyone," he said. "We don't need this to become a bigger issue." "I already reported it," I said. "You fired me." "Human resources handled that," he replied. "There were misunderstandings. Misconduct isn't a misunderstanding," I said. Another pause. "Mark has agreed to attend coaching." "Coaching," I repeated. "That's your fix." "It's a step," he said. "And we'd ask you to sign a standard agreement. Confidentiality, non-disparagement." "So I come back," I said, "and I pretend none of this happened." "You move forward," Daniel said. "We all do." I pictured the folder Patricia slid across the table. The language, the silence. "What happens if I don't?" Daniel's voice tightened. "I'd hate to see this escalate." "Escalate how?" I asked. "Careers get complicated," he said. "Reputations suffer. Mine already did." I said, "You made sure of that." He softened his tone again. "You're talented, Kelsey. Don't let one moment define you." "One moment didn't," I said. "Your decision did." He sighed. "You're asking us to admit fault." "I'm asking you to stop hiding it," I said. "We can't do that," Daniel said. "Then we're done," I said. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. I stood from the table. "You're asking me to make it easier for you." He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He just said my name once more, like it might change something. I ended the call before the story could be rewritten. What breaks first when a system is built on denial? I didn't hear about the fallout from a press release or a company memo. I heard it in pieces, through voices that sounded different now. Lauren called one evening. "They pulled Mark off the Phoenix project," she said. "That was his biggest account." I replied, She said, "The client asked for a different lead." They said communication had become unpredictable. A few days later, another former coworker texted me. 2 senior analysts resigned this week. When I called him, he didn't waste time. "People are tired of covering," he said. "And they're tired of being told to smile about it." The complaints started piling up where I had warned they would. Missed deadlines, conflicting directives. Clients asking why answers kept changing depending on who they spoke to. Mark tried to tighten his grip. That only made it worse. He called a team meeting, Lauren told me. Said we needed to recommit to loyalty. I could picture it too clearly. "What did people say?" I asked. "No one said anything," she replied. But afterward, 2 people updated their resumes. A week later, Daniel called again. I didn't answer, but his voicemail was shorter this time. No reassurance, no offers, just pressure. "We're facing some operational challenges," he said. "This is exactly why internal alignment matters." Internal alignment. The phrase landed like an echo of everything I'd been told to ignore. The irony didn't escape anyone. The very behavior I'd flagged was now being cited in client emails. The tone, the volatility, the inability to take responsibility. "He snapped at a vendor," Lauren said quietly, on a recorded call. I closed my eyes. "That won't stay buried." "It didn't," she said. "Legal is involved now." By the end of the month, Mark wasn't a protected figure anymore. He was a problem no one could explain away. And the silence that once shielded him had started to crack, not because someone spoke up, but because the truth no longer needed a witness. How does it feel when the people who dismissed you suddenly need you? Daniel called from a different number this time. I recognized his voice before he said my name, Kelsey. He said, skipping the pleasantries, "We need to talk." "Today, I'm listening," I said. "There are complications," he replied. "Clients are concerned. Legal is asking questions." "That sounds internal," I said. He didn't argue. "You understand how things work here. You always did. You fired me," I said. "That changed how things work for me." His breath caught, just slightly. "We wouldn't be in this position if you hadn't escalated." "I escalated because you told me to," I said. "Your policy said report upward. This isn't the time to debate process," Daniel said. "We need stability." "You had stability," I replied. "You chose not to keep it." There was a pause, longer than before. "What would it take for you to help us smooth this out?" "I'm not helping you smooth anything," I said. "We're not asking you to take responsibility," he said quickly, "just to clarify things, publicly, internally, so I clean it up." I said, "And you keep calling it alignment." "That's not fair," Daniel said. "It's accurate," I replied. His voice dropped. "The board is watching this closely." I was watching too, I said. "When you decided who mattered," he tried again. "We can issue a statement, acknowledge tensions." "Tensions," I repeated. "That's your word for harm, Kelsey," he said, sharper now. "This could have long-term consequences." "For you," I said, "not for me." Silence stretched between us, heavy and unfamiliar. When he spoke again, the confidence was gone. "We thought you'd want to protect the company," he said. "I wanted you to protect people," I replied. "You didn't. I'm asking you to reconsider," he said. "I already did," I said, and ended the call. For the first time since all of this began, I understood something clearly. They didn't need my silence anymore. They needed my cooperation. And I wasn't giving them either. What does accountability look like when it finally arrives? Lauren called me during lunch. She didn't say hello. She said, "It's over." I waited. "They concluded the investigation this morning," she continued. "Mark was terminated." Immediately, I closed my eyes. "For cause, yes," she said. "They cited multiple violations, not just what you reported, things they said they couldn't substantiate before." I let that sit. Then I asked, "And human resources?" Lauren exhaled. Patricia and 2 senior managers were removed. Procedural abuse. Retaliation. They said the words out loud this time. "Did Daniel approve it?" I asked. There was a pause. He wasn't there. "What do you mean?" the board questioned him yesterday, she said. "This morning, they announced his resignation." I pictured Daniel's calm voice, the way he'd said risk instead of harm. "Resigned," I repeated. "They said it was mutual," Lauren added quietly, "but no one believes that." Later that day, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. A man introduced himself as outside counsel for the company. "We're not seeking anything from you," he said. "I'm calling to formally acknowledge that your report was handled improperly." "Is that on record?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "It will be included in the board's findings." "And the reason I was terminated?" I asked. A brief pause. "That language has been withdrawn, not apologized for, not corrected, just erased. We're reviewing internal policies," he continued. "There will be changes." "I hope so," I said. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something steadier than both. The kind of calm that comes when the truth no longer needs defending. Lauren texted me later. "People are talking now. Not whispering, talking." I read that message twice. Then I set my phone down and went back to my day, knowing that what happened next was no longer up to me. What do you gain when you walk away instead of winning? I ran into Daniel months later, not in a boardroom, but in a quiet cafe near my new office. He looked older, smaller. "Kelsey," he said, standing too quickly. "I heard you landed somewhere good." "I did," I said. "It fits." He nodded, hands clasped like he was waiting for permission to continue. "Things are different now. I imagine they are. They brought in compliance consultants," he said, "new reporting channels, mandatory reviews." "That's good," I replied. He hesitated. "I should have handled it differently." "You should have handled it," I said. He absorbed that, then gave a short, tight smile. You were right about Mark, I know, I said. You knew too. Daniel didn't argue. We thought protecting the structure would protect the company. It protected the wrong people. I said. The company still existed. It had contracts, offices, a name people recognized. But it was watched now, audited, cautious. The kind of place that had learned, too late, that silence is not stability. I never went back. I didn't consult. I didn't profit from their collapse. I built something else, somewhere else, with people who didn't flinch when the truth made things uncomfortable. Lauren texts me sometimes. Short updates, promotions, new leadership. It's not perfect, she wrote once, but it's better. That was enough. I didn't destroy an empire. I stopped holding up something that was already rotten. When it finally gave way, that wasn't revenge, it was gravity. Life lesson. If a system only works when good people stay quiet, then leaving is not losing. It is choosing yourself over a place that never chose integrity in the first place. The moment my boss fired me, my manager smiled like she had just won something she had been planning for a long time. Sandra, Mark Reynolds said, folding his hands on the table, this isn't working anymore. We're terminating your position, effective immediately. I nodded once, not because I agreed, but because my voice didn't trust itself yet. Before I could say anything, the door opened. Lydia Moore walked in without knocking. She didn't look at me. She walked straight toward Mark, her heels clicking with confidence, and leaned in slightly. Congrats, she said, loud enough for me to hear. You finally pulled the thorn from your side. She laughed, not awkwardly, not nervously, comfortably. I finally spoke. Is this your decision too? Lydia glanced at me for the first time, eyes sharp, amused. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Mark cleared his throat. Human resources will handle the exit process. Sandra, you'll receive details by email. I waited, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the past 6 years. Just silence that expected me to shrink. Instead, I stood. All right, I said. I'll hand everything over. Lydia blinked, clearly disappointed. That was easy, it usually is, I replied. Mark avoided my eyes as I turned toward the door. Lydia was still smiling when I left, as if the story had already ended. It hadn't. My name is Sandra Whitman. I was the senior compliance and licensing specialist at the company they had just decided could run without me. I had built systems they never bothered to understand. I had warned them about deadlines they never remembered. And I had learned, the hard way, that competence looks like a threat to people who want control without responsibility. I didn't slam the door. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply walked out, already knowing that this silence would speak much louder than anything I could have said in that room. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. While inspired by real workplace dynamics, all characters, companies, and events are fictional. This story explores themes of power, accountability, and quiet resilience, and it is meant to entertain, provoke thought, and give voice to experiences many people recognize, but rarely get to tell. I went back to my desk to begin the handover they were so sure would erase me. They'll manage, Lydia had said more than once. Compliance isn't brain surgery. She said it in meetings, in hallways, once even while pouring coffee. Each time, she glanced at me like the subject had already been settled. I had corrected her once, quietly. It's not compliance, I said. It's operating authority. She smiled then too. Same thing. It wasn't. It never was. My job was licenses. Operating licenses. State registrations. Renewals that had to be filed in the right order, with the right wording, under the right entity names, or the company didn't legally exist in those markets. I tracked dates, dependencies, grace periods. I coordinated with outside regulators who did not care who Lydia was or how confident Mark sounded in meetings. Mark liked to say, Sandra handles the paperwork. Whenever someone asked how we stayed compliant across multiple states. Paperwork. Once, during a quarterly review, I said, 3 renewals are coming up mid-quarter. We need approvals early. Mark waved his hand, put it on the list. I sent the list. I said, twice. Lydia leaned back in her chair. You send a lot of emails, Sandra. I send reminders. I replied. Because deadlines don't move. She tilted her head. You worry too much. I didn't argue. I sent another email the next morning, then another the following week. Short, clear, subject lines marked urgent, then critical, dates spelled out, consequences stated plainly. No one replied with questions. No one asked for clarification. Lydia forwarded one of my emails back to me with a single line, handled. I learned to document everything after that, not out of paranoia, out of habit. The Friday before I was fired, I stood in Mark's doorway. I need confirmation on the upcoming renewals. He didn't look up from his screen. Lydia's overseeing that now. I still need written approval, I said. Lydia looked at me from across the room. You really don't trust anyone, do you? I met her gaze. I trust processes. She laughed. That's your problem. I went back to my desk and sent one more email. Polite, direct, attached timelines, highlighted dates. By Monday afternoon, they decided I was unnecessary. They called it streamlining. I called it wishful thinking. And I had already warned them what happens when deadlines are treated like opinions. Human Resources scheduled the handover for the next morning. Janet from HR met me in a small room and slid a printed checklist across the table. We'll keep this simple, she said. Access credentials, internal documentation, and process notes. I read the list once, slowly, then I nodded. Is there anything missing? Janet asked. No, I said. This covers what I'm responsible for. She hesitated, pen hovering, licensing. That's included in the documentation, I replied. Oversight was reassigned last quarter. She made a note and didn't press further. I spent the rest of the morning transferring exactly what they asked for. Shared folders, internal calendars, procedure manuals I had written myself. I reset passwords, documented where everything lived, and confirmed access with the new team lead, a junior analyst named Brian who looked nervous just opening the files. You sure this is everything? He asked. Yes, I said. Everything I've been asked to hand over? He swallowed. Okay. At noon, I sent one final email. Subject transition confirmation. All requested materials have been transferred and access has been granted per the handover checklist provided by Human Resources. Documentation related to compliance and licensing processes is included in the shared drive. Ongoing oversight responsibilities now rest with the assigned department. Please confirm receipt. I sent it to Mark, Lydia, and Janet. No attachments, no commentary, just facts. Lydia replied 15 minutes later. Received. Thank you. That was it. I didn't add a follow-up note. I didn't restate deadlines that were already documented. I didn't explain nuances they had dismissed for years. Because at that point, doing so would have meant continuing to do the job they had just decided I was no longer worth paying for. I shut down my workstation, returned my badge, and signed the exit form. Janet offered a polite smile. I'm sorry it ended this way. So am I said, and meant it. When I walked out of the building, my inbox was already quiet. The systems were in their hands now, and for the first time in years, I stopped holding them together. 2 days after I left, Brian called me. I'm sorry to bother you, he said quickly, like he was afraid someone might hear. I'm trying to understand the licensing structure. Which part? I asked. All of it, he admitted. I didn't realize how many states were tied together. There are 12 active Midwest markets, I said. Each one has its own operating license. Some renew independently, some depend on umbrella filings. If one lapses, the others don't pause out of courtesy. He was quiet for a moment. Lydia said it was just renewals, annual stuff. I almost laughed, but stopped myself. Nothing about licensing is just anything. I could hear papers shuffling. These dates, he said, they're all close. They don't move. I replied, they never have. I remembered a meeting from earlier that year. I had projected a timeline on the screen, dates highlighted in red. We're getting buried in emails, Lydia had said. You don't need to keep flagging the same thing. I do. I said then, because if we miss one, Mark cut me off. Sandra, we trust you. Stop panicking. I trusted calendars. Calendars never lied. Back on the phone, Brian lowered his voice. One of these licenses expires on October 1st. Yes, I said. That's less than 2 weeks after you were let go. Yes, I repeated. He exhaled slowly. Who's approving it now? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because the answer wasn't mine to give. Check the handover email, I said. Oversight was reassigned. I saw that, he said. but nobody's actually watching it. I leaned back in my chair at home, phone warm against my ear. Deadlines don't wait for clarity, I said. They arrive whether you're ready or not. Brian swallowed. Should I tell Lydia you should follow the process? I replied. The same one she told me not to overthink. When the call ended, I sat there for a long moment. The clock was still moving. It always had been. The only difference was that this time, I wasn't the one counting down. Janet from Human Resources called first. Hi, Sandra. I just had a quick question, she said, voice careful. You're no longer listed as the point of contact for compliance, but some of the documentation references you by name. That's correct, I said. Those documents reflect historical ownership, so you're not overseeing anything right now. No, I replied. Oversight was reassigned before my termination. A pause. Papers shifting. Right. Okay. Just needed to confirm. She hung up without saying goodbye. 10 minutes later, Lydia texted me. Hey, hope you're settling in. Quick thing, can you help clarify a licensing detail? Just until we get fully aligned. I stared at the message for a long moment. Not angry, not tempted. Just aware of how quickly the tone had changed. I typed back. Hi, Lydia. All materials were transferred per the handover checklist. Any questions should be directed to the current owner of the process. Her reply came fast. It'll only take a minute. I responded just as quickly. I'm no longer authorized to advise on active compliance matters. Thank you for understanding. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Wow. She finally wrote, didn't think you'd be like this. Like what? I wondered. Accurate, I didn't reply. An hour later, Mark called. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. Sandra, it's Mark. We just need some context. No big deal. Call me when you can. I deleted it. By the end of the day, there were 2 more emails. One from Janet, one from someone in operations I barely knew, all carefully worded, all vague, all circling the same thing without naming it. I answered none of them, not because I was being difficult, because stepping back in, even for 1 minute, would have meant stepping back into responsibility without authority. They had taken the title, they had taken the access, they had taken the decision-making. What they were asking for now was something else entirely. And I wasn't giving that away for free anymore. I didn't hear it from management. I heard it from Alex. He and I had started at the company the same year. He moved into operations. I stayed in compliance. We hadn't spoken since my exit, which is why his call surprised me. Sandra, he said, not bothering with a greeting. Are you sitting down? I'm fine, I replied. What happened? There was a sharp exhale on the other end. We just got shut down in 5 states. Completely frozen. I closed my eyes. As of when midnight, he said. Licenses expired. Shipments are stuck. Legal told sales to stop promising delivery dates. Clients are already calling. Who's handling the renewals, I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Mark, Alex said. He signed the acknowledgement. I said nothing. He keeps saying there must be a mistake. Alex continued. Lydia's telling people the system failed. The system didn't fail, I said. It did exactly what it was designed to do. Alex lowered his voice. They're scrambling. Mark tried calling you earlier. I know, they're asking who dropped the ball. I let the silence stretch, not to punish him, to let the truth settle. Sandra, Alex said carefully. Did you know this would happen? I warned them. I replied, in writing, multiple times. Another breath. So this isn't on you. No, I said. It isn't. By noon, the rumors were everywhere. Contracts paused. A client threatening penalties. Operations teams sitting idle, waiting for approvals that couldn't come without valid licenses. Meetings stacked on top of each other with no outcomes. No one from leadership reached out to me. Not yet. Alex called again later. His voice was tight. Mark's in a conference room with legal. Lydia's crying. Someone mentioned the CEO is flying in. Okay, I said. That's all you have to say. That's all there is to say. When we hung up, I placed my phone face down on the table. The system had stopped breathing, and for the first time, the weight of that silence belonged to someone else. The call came from an unfamiliar number just after 8. This is Thomas Caldwell, the voice said, calm, controlled. I'm the Chief Executive Officer. I sat up. I know who you are. I've spent the last 6 hours reviewing internal correspondence. He continued, emails, attachments, timelines. I'd like to clarify a few things. Of course, I said. You sent multiple notices regarding license renewals, he said, dated weeks before your termination. Yes. You flagged specific deadlines, consequences, required approvals. Yes. A pause. I could hear someone typing in the background. You were terminated on a Monday, he said, by Mark Reynolds. Yes. And that decision did not come across my desk, he added. No, I said again, his voice sharpened. It should have. He didn't ask me to come in. He didn't ask me to fix anything. He thanked me for my time and ended the call. I heard what happened next from Alex. They pulled Mark and Lydia into the executive conference room, he said, speaking fast. Thomas had everything on the screen. Your emails, every reminder. What did they say? I asked. Mark kept saying he thought it was handled. Alex replied. Lydia said you were overstepping. And then Alex swallowed. Thomas stood up, walked right over to Mark, grabbed his tie and said, Who gave you permission to fire her? I closed my eyes. He didn't yell. Alex went on. That's what made it worse. He said it slowly, like he wanted everyone to remember it. Silence filled the room, according to Alex. No one spoke. No one moved. Lydia tried to explain. Alex said. Thomas cut her off, told her the company was now paying the price for arrogance and shortcuts. What about Mark? I asked. He couldn't answer. Just kept staring at the table. By the end of the meeting, the story inside the company had changed completely. I was no longer the problem they had removed. I was the warning they had ignored. And the paper trail made sure no one could pretend otherwise. They called again the next morning. This time, it wasn't human resources. It was Thomas Caldwell himself. Sandra, he said, his tone different now, less controlled. We need to talk. I'm listening, I replied. We want to make this right, he said. Mark's decision was reckless. Lydia overstepped. We're prepared to reinstate you immediately. I see, I said. He continued quickly, like he was afraid I might interrupt. Your role would be elevated, senior director level, full authority restored, compensation adjusted accordingly. How adjusted? I asked. There was a brief pause, a substantial increase. I didn't ask for a summary, I said. I asked for clarity. An additional $80,000 annually, he said, effective immediately. I let that sit between us. And the expectation? I asked. Damage control. Yes, Thomas admitted. We need you to stabilize operations and manage regulators. You're the only one who understands the full system. I understand, I said, but I'm not coming back like that. Silence. I'm not stepping into a crisis I didn't create. I continued. And I'm not resuming a role where my authority disappears the moment it becomes inconvenient. Thomas exhaled. Then tell me what you want. For now, I said. A limited consulting agreement, defined scope, defined duration, written authority. No assumptions. How long? He asked. 1 week, I replied. To restore licensing compliance. After that, you decide how to proceed without me. And compensation market rate, I said. Paid up front. Another pause. Longer this time. And reinstatement? He asked. No? I said. That chapter is closed. Thomas's voice softened. You're leaving. I already left. I said. This is me choosing how, if at all, I return. When the call ended, I set my phone down and stared at the wall for a moment. They had taken my position without hesitation. Now they were offering everything back. Hoping panic could erase intent, it couldn't. And for the first time since that meeting room, I felt completely in control. I didn't have to be there to know what happened. Alex told me in pieces. Between meetings that kept getting rescheduled because no one was sure who was allowed to approve anything anymore. Mark's title changed, he said quietly. They didn't announce it. They just removed things, removed what I asked. His signing authority, his approval rights. Anything that actually moves a decision forward. So Mark Reynolds still came to work. He still sat in meetings. But when conversations reached the point where someone had to say yes or no, the room went silent and looked past him. And Lydia? I asked. Alex hesitated. She got reassigned to where internal audit, compliance oversight. I closed my eyes for a moment. They said it was a lateral move, Alex went on. Same pay, same office. But now every license, every filing, every missed detail has to be signed off with her name on it. Does she know? I asked. She does now. he said. She tried to push something through yesterday. Legal kicked it back and copied the executive team, twice. No one yelled. No one embarrassed her publicly. There were no dramatic exits or cardboard boxes. There was just accountability. Mark couldn't delegate decisions anymore. Lydia couldn't dismiss details as administrative. The system they had ignored was now the only thing anyone cared about, and it followed rules, not confidence. Alex lowered his voice. They keep asking if you'll come back. I won't, I said. I figured. They wanted a clean fix, I added. What they got was a permanent one, after the call ended. I sat with the silence, not the heavy kind, the earned kind. They were still there, trapped inside the structure they had underestimated, forced to live with the consequences every single day. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had simply stopped carrying what was never meant to be carried alone. The agreement arrived by email that afternoon. 5 pages. Clean language. Clear scope. 1 week. Licensing recovery only. Written authority signed by the chief executive officer. Payment wired in advance. Thomas called after I confirmed receipt. Thank you for agreeing to this, he said. We won't waste the opportunity. I'm not giving you an opportunity, I replied. I'm fulfilling a contract. He accepted that without argument. I went back into the building on Monday as a consultant. Not an employee. No badge. No team. Just access to the systems that still worked because I had built them to survive chaos. I spoke when clarity was required and stopped when my part was done. Mark avoided me entirely. Lydia tried once. She stood in the doorway of the conference room while I was reviewing filings. I didn't realize, she said quietly. I honestly didn't understand how much rested on this. I looked at her. I explained it. I said, you just didn't listen. There was nothing else to add. By Friday afternoon, the licenses were reinstated. Regulators satisfied. Operations resumed. The crisis closed. Thomas shook my hand before I left. We would still like to discuss something permanent. I won't, I said. This company doesn't need me forever. It needs to learn how to function without leaning on one person's silence. He nodded. This time, I believed he understood. I walked out for the last time without anger, without regret, and without the weight I had carried for years. The building didn't feel smaller. I just felt lighter. Later that evening, Alex texted me. Everything's running again. They're nervous. Careful. Good, I replied. They should be. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't sabotage. I didn't take revenge. I stopped compensating for neglect. If your competence only matters when you are gone, then your presence was never respected. Walking away is not weakness when your silence forces others to finally take responsibility. The moment I told my boss the new feature had crossed $400,000 in monthly recurring revenue, the room went quiet in a way that felt wrong. I'm Emma. I was the product lead on the platform. Everyone in that meeting pretended they understood. I finished my sentence, waiting for the usual response, congratulations. Maybe a forced smile, but none of that came. My boss, Richard, leaned back in his chair and said, "Who controls access?" I blinked. "Access to what? The core system," he replied. "Voice even. Who can change it without approval?" There were people in that room who had reviewed my work for months. No one spoke, I said, carefully. "I do. It's part of my role." Richard nodded once. Not approval, more like confirmation. "Good to know." The meeting ended 10 minutes early. As we stood up, one of my teammates whispered, "That was weird," and I laughed it off. Startups get tense around growth. That's what I told myself on the way back to my desk. That's what I told myself when Richard didn't respond to my follow-up email. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. While inspired by real workplace dynamics and power struggles many professionals face, all characters, companies, and events are fictional. This story explores control, ownership, and the moment a person realizes their value was never tied to permission. The next morning, I walked into the office and stopped cold. My desk was empty. No laptop, no notebook, no badge. Just a single envelope placed dead center. Like someone wanted to be sure I saw it before anything else. I opened it standing up. Inside was a termination letter with my name printed cleanly at the top. Effective immediately, below it, a handwritten note in Richard's sharp, familiar script. "I've invested too much in you. I have the right to take this back." I stood there while coworkers avoided my eyes. My phone buzzed once. Access revoked, email gone, calendar wiped. I didn't say anything, I didn't argue. I just folded the letter slowly. Because in that moment, I understood something Richard didn't. He thought he had taken everything. The email from Human Resources arrived before I reached the elevator. Asset recovery is now in process. It read, "Please confirm that all company property has been returned." I stared at the screen, then looked down at my empty hands. I typed back. My desk was cleared before I arrived. The reply came almost instantly. Noted. I folded the termination letter again, slower this time, and slipped it into my bag. As I turned the corner, Richard stepped out of his office like he had been waiting for me. "Emma," he said, lowering his voice, "let's keep this professional." Professional. I held up the envelope. "You wiped my access before speaking to me." He sighed. The kind of sigh meant to sound patient. "You're taking this personally." "You fired me overnight. We made a decision," he corrected. "You were becoming complicated." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Complicated because the product worked. He leaned closer. "Because you forgot who made that possible." "I built it," I said. "You were paid to build it," he replied. "We invested in you, training, resources, trust." He gestured vaguely down the hallway. "That feature didn't happen in a vacuum." "My name is on the architecture," I said. "You approved every design, and I gave you the authority," he snapped. Then he caught himself and softened his tone. "That's my point. Authority comes from us." I watched his face as he spoke, the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this conversation. "You should be grateful," he continued. "Most people don't get to work on something this big." Grateful. The word landed like a slap. "You took my laptop," I said. "You locked me out without notice." "Company property," he said. "Company systems." "My work isn't a leash," I replied. His jaw tightened. "Careful." That was when it clicked. The meeting yesterday, the question about access, the silence afterward. This wasn't a reaction, it was a plan. Richard straightened his jacket. "We'll take it from here." I met his eyes and said nothing. Anger burned hot in my chest, but I kept it contained. He wanted me emotional. Unstable? Wrong. As he walked away, I realized he truly believed he owned what I had built, and that belief was about to cost him far more than he understood. I didn't cry when I got home. I didn't pace or call anyone. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and read the termination terms line by line. Access to company systems has been transferred to management. The document said, transferred, not revoked, not disabled, transferred. I opened my email backup, the one I had set up months ago after a late-night conversation with our security lead. He had laughed when I told him I liked redundancy. "Paranoia keeps systems alive," he'd said. I scrolled through the permissions list Richard had signed off on: reporting access, dashboard visibility, read-only analytics. That was it. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya, one of the engineers. "They locked us out of the deploy pipeline," she wrote. "Do you know what's going on?" I stared at the message, then typed back, "I don't work there anymore." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Wait. What? I set the phone face down and leaned back. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. "Why are there 2 dashboards?" Richard had asked during a review weeks earlier. I had kept my tone neutral. One shows performance metrics, the other controls system behavior, and both are necessary. "One is for visibility," I said. "One is for stability." He had frowned. "Seems redundant." "It's deliberate," I replied. "Different audiences need different access." He nodded like he understood. He didn't ask another question, now. Sitting alone, I logged into my personal credentials. Everything responded exactly as it should. No alarms, no warnings, no changes. They hadn't touched the core routing. They hadn't taken the scaling logic. They hadn't even realized there was a separation. Richard had taken the dashboard, the one designed to look important, the one executives loved because it gave them numbers and charts and the illusion of control. I opened a system log and watched activity scroll by. New attempts, failed handoffs, confusion spreading quietly through layers. No one else knew how to read. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Richard. "Can you confirm something for me?" his message read. "There's an issue with the reporting view." I didn't reply. For the first time since that meeting, my breathing slowed, the panic drained out. replaced by something steady and cold. He thought he had taken access. What he had actually taken was the decoy. I logged in one last time using my personal administrator credentials, not to change anything, not to move files or shut systems down, just to leave. My phone rang while the screen loaded. It was Maya again. "Emma," she said, voice tight. "They're asking for you in the war room." "I don't work there," I replied. There was a pause. "They said you still have access." "I have my access," I said calmly. "That's not the same thing," she exhaled. "They're saying you're blocking them." "I haven't touched anything," I said. "Check the logs." Silence. Then, quieter. "They're pulling them up now." I navigated to the credential panel and selected my name. The permissions list glowed back at me, exactly as it had for months. Full routing authority, deployment override, emergency rollback. I clicked log out. The system asked for confirmation. I confirmed. That was it. No alarms, no errors, no dramatic shutdown. The platform kept running, just as it had before. I sat there for a moment, hands still, waiting for the spike of guilt people always warned about. It never came. "I didn't delete anything," I said aloud. Though no one was there to hear it, I didn't take anything. My phone buzzed again, a new number this time. "Emma, this is legal," a man said, brisk but cautious. "We need to understand what actions you've taken since termination." I logged out. I said, "Did you alter any data?" "No." "Disable any systems?" "No." "Remove access for others?" I removed myself. He paused. "We're reviewing the audit trail. You'll find it clean," I said. "Because it is." The call ended without a response. I opened the activity log on my own screen and watched the entries scroll. My logout. Time stamped. Verified. No deletions, no modifications. I wasn't the system. I was the one holding it together. Another message came through, this time from Richard. "Something isn't right," he wrote. "We need you to clarify." I closed the laptop without replying. I had done nothing wrong, and somehow, that was exactly what was about to expose everything. The first message came just after noon. It was from Maya again. "Deployments are stuck," she wrote. "Nothing's failing, nothing's moving either." I stared at the screen and set my phone down without answering. An hour later, another name lit up. "Jordan from support. Do you still have time to look at a few tickets?" he asked. "We've got a backlog forming." "I'm not on the team," I replied. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. "They said you might still help," he wrote. They shouldn't have said that. A few minutes passed. Then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. "Emma, it's Richard," my former boss said. He sounded annoyed, not panicked. "There's some confusion internally." "There isn't," I said. "Our dashboard shows everything is stable." "That dashboard only shows what it's meant to show." He lowered his voice. "We just need a quick clarification, a few minutes." "Off the record, I'm no longer employed," I said. "I can't advise." "This is about the company," he snapped. "About what you built." "What I built is still running," I said. "You have access to the reports," he corrected. "That's what you asked for." He went quiet, then said, "Support is overwhelmed." "Then staff support," I replied. "You're being difficult. I'm being precise." He exhaled sharply. "You know how this looks." "I know exactly how it looks," I said. "You took control. Use it." I ended the call before he could respond. Later that afternoon, Maya texted again. "Clients are asking why nothing new is shipping." I typed, deleted, then typed again. "They approved the process," I wrote. "They didn't approve the handoff." I set the phone aside and didn't touch it again. From the outside, everything still looked fine. The revenue chart climbed like it always had. The numbers stayed steady. The interface smiled back, clean and reassuring. Inside, nothing moved, no errors, no alerts, just silence spreading. One unanswered message at a time. Richard called just after dinner. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello, Emma," he said, like we were picking up a meeting that had paused instead of a career he'd ended. "Good. You're available." I answered the phone. I said, "That's all." He ignored that. "There's some friction internally. Nothing serious. We just need you to walk us through a few things." "I'm not employed," I replied. "This wouldn't be official," he said quickly. "Just a conversation. 10 minutes. You fired me without one." I said, "You can manage without one now." He laughed, short and controlled. "You're being dramatic. I'm being accurate." A breath on the other end. Emma, listen. You built something important here. Nobody's disputing that. You disputed it when you took my access. We took company assets, he corrected. And we can give them back. I don't want them back. That's not what this is about, he said. This is about continuity. You mean dependence? He paused. When he spoke again, his voice softened. You owe this team something. I gave them everything while I was there. You owe me, he said. The edge slipping through. I put you in that position. I trusted you. You trusted the results. I replied. Not me. That feature didn't happen without us, he said. It didn't happen without me either. Silence stretched. Then he tried a different angle. We can revisit the termination, adjust the terms, make this right. You already did, I said. You showed me exactly how you see me. Another pause. Longer this time. Emma, he said quietly. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not, I said. You are. I ended the call and set the phone face down on the table. For the first time since the meeting where everything changed. I felt steady, not victorious, not angry, just clear. He had fired me thinking that would end the conversation. Instead, it was the moment he lost control of it. The first renewal didn't fall through, it paused. Maya texted me late that night. Enterprise client wants to delay signing. Legal review, I didn't respond. The next morning, an email thread landed in my inbox by accident. Someone had forwarded it without checking the recipients. My name was still cached in an old distribution list. Subject line, risk exposure review. One message stood out. We need clarity on system ownership and continuity. An investor wrote. Who can operate this independently? Another replied. We were told the knowledge was distributed. A third came in minutes later. It isn't. My phone rang. This time, it wasn't Richard. Emma. It's Daniel, the voice said. Daniel had been an advisor during our early funding rounds. He sounded tired. I won't keep you long. You already are, I said, but gently. They're asking questions. He continued. Hard ones. About what? I asked. About why no one else understands the system you built, he said. About why leadership thought access was the same as knowledge. I leaned back in my chair. And what did they say that you were replaceable, he said. That everything important was documented. I let the silence sit. Daniel cleared his throat. They're requesting an external audit, codebase, process, termination timeline. That won't help them, I said. No. He agreed. It won't. A notification buzzed on my screen. Another forwarded email. Support escalation. Client concerns. Language carefully chosen. Fear tucked between bullet points. Is there anything you want me to pass along? Daniel asked. Yes, I said. Tell them I didn't leave gaps. I left boundaries. He exhaled slowly. They're starting to understand the difference. We ended the call. An hour later, a message came through from Richard. Copied to the board. Polite. Formal. Too late. We are confident the situation is under control, he wrote. But confidence wasn't what the investors were asking for anymore. They were asking for proof. Human Resources reached out 3 days later. Emma, the woman said, introducing herself as Karen from compliance. Her voice was careful, practiced. We'd like to schedule an exit interview. I already exited, I said. This is different, she replied. There were procedural concerns. Concerns about what? I asked. A lack of transition, she said. Questions about authorization. About whether proper steps were followed. By whom? I said. She paused. By leadership. That word landed heavier than anything Richard had said all week. We're reviewing potential process violations, Karen continued. In light of recent developments, the company is prepared to discuss amended terms. Reinstatement, I asked. Consulting, she said quickly. Temporary, paid, limited scope. So you want access, I said. We want cooperation. I gave you that when I worked there. Silence. Then, we believe this can be resolved. It already has, I said. Karen lowered her voice. Emma, between us. This escalated faster than anyone expected. It escalated the moment I stopped being useful, I replied. Another pause. Richard feels this has become personal. It was always personal, I said, just not for me. She cleared her throat. Is there anything you want on record? Yes, I said. Please note this clearly. I slowed my words. Not for effect, but for accuracy. You didn't fire me because I failed, I said. You fired me because you were afraid I didn't need you. Karen didn't interrupt. You mistook control for leadership, I continued, and access for ownership. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief, I felt finished. An hour later, an internal memo circulated. Leadership changes under review. External audit approved. Communications to clients pending. No one asked me to come back again. They didn't need an exit interview. They already knew exactly what had gone wrong. I didn't announce that I was consulting again. I just answered emails. The first one came from a founder I'd met years earlier. We need help stabilizing a release. He wrote, short term, clean terms. We spoke for 20 minutes. He didn't ask about my last job. He asked how I thought. You keep ownership of your process, he said. We don't touch what isn't ours, I agreed. A day later, Maya called. Not from the office, from her car. They suspended him, she said. Suspended who? I asked, though I already knew. Richard, effective immediately. I closed my eyes and listened to her breathe on the other end. They said it was temporary, she added. Pending review. Reviews take time, I said. They're already pulling threads, she said. Contracts. Termination approvals. Who signed what? I didn't comment. Another call came that evening. Daniel again. 2 investors withdrew. He said, not quietly. Because of the system. I said, because of leadership. He corrected. They said they don't fund companies that confuse possession with competence. I let that sit. Are you okay? He asked. Yes. I said, and meant it. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt lighter. I hadn't set out to expose anyone. I hadn't warned anyone. I had simply stopped holding everything together for people who believed that meant they owned me. That night, I closed my laptop at a reasonable hour. No alerts followed. No frantic messages. The world didn't end. I sent one final invoice for my new contract and archived the thread, somewhere across the city. A company was learning how much it cost to mistake silence for stability. I didn't watch it burn. I walked away. The final email arrived on a quiet morning, copied to a list longer than it needed to be. Effective immediately, it began. Richard Hale has been removed from his leadership role. Below that, a second paragraph followed. An internal review confirmed violations of termination procedure, access governance, and risk oversight. New policies are now in place. My phone rang seconds later. It's done, Daniel said. His voice sounded older than the last time we spoke. They didn't fight it. They couldn't, I replied. They wanted a statement from you, he added. Something neutral. I've already said everything that matters, I said. He paused. For what it's worth, you handled this with more restraint than most people would have. I wasn't trying to win, I said. I was trying to leave clean. After the call, a message came through from one of the investors I'd met only once. We've exited our position, he wrote. We don't invest in people who think they own other people. I read that line twice, then closed the email. I didn't feel relief. I felt alignment. Everything had finally landed where it belonged. Later that afternoon, Maya stopped by my place. She didn't sit down. They're rewriting everything, she said. Access rules, ownership language, even how they talk about talent. Good, I said. She studied me. Do you miss it? I shook my head. I miss who I thought they were. When she left, I opened my laptop and logged into my current project. Clean contract, clear boundaries, mutual respect. I didn't take anything back. I just stopped holding everything together for people who mistook proximity for ownership. Power does not come from control, titles, or access. It comes from knowing when your value is being exploited and having the courage to step away without burning yourself down to keep others warm.